Continue with the previous video. Right, so that's why here is our while loop. So while loop, we will ask for the user input again, but only for the invalid score. So that's why here now you see we don't have the else. Because the else actually is earlier our invalid input error message. But now here we were taking care that's in the while loop. Okay, so here actually I already finished this part. So that's why earlier I just showed you how you will display the error message. But now here you will see the example. We also give them using the range. Besides I write 0 to 100, we can just still using the minimum score. So that's why let me delete this part earlier I showed you. Okay, so then you will using the while loop to validate user input. And also this one you can see the while is for the invalid input. So we change that will be less than minimum score or greater than maximum score. So that's invalid. So when they are invalid input, so please enter that range again. So after we done this while loop, you can see this while loop, if the user always give you the invalid input, you will continue. The only way they will finish is they are enter the valid input. So only when user give us the valid input, so then you see here, we're using the if statement to check their grade. So we will run the output to see the result. Since the program will first check if the input value is between the minimum score and the maximum score. So if we give them a bigger value, they will give us the error message. So then access to run again. So the same thing, you see negative number. But then if we give them the correct value in the correct boundary, so then they will leave the while loop. So the while loop condition will be false. So they leave the while loop. Then they will check the score and give you the correct letter grade. So that's our example to modify from the chapter 4 example 9. Using a while loop to evaluate the user input. Continue in this video, I want to finish talk about the requirement in our lab exercise 6. In the lab exercise 6, we will ask you to do practice 2 things. So the first one, we will using the while loop. The second one, we will practice how to display our format in a table format. So in order to practice how to use the while loop, we have couple requirements in this assignment. We want you to use while loop. So we see what we will do in the lab exercise 6. So the lab exercise 6, we will talk about the application is the distance traveled. So let me show you the output first. The sample output look like this. So we will tell the user the program calculate the hourly distance traveled. So we will ask user 2 information. The first information is the average speed for this vehicle. So that will be mile per hour. Then we will ask how many hours it traveled. So this travel hour should be integer. So we only accept integer only. So now since we talk about the input validation, so when you ask the user for the speed of the vehicle, we want the value should be greater or equal to 0. So definitely cannot be the negative number when they travel. So that's why earlier we talked about how to do the input validation. You should using a while loop. When the user input is invalid, you should continue to tell them why they got input error. Then continue to ask them to input the speed of vehicle again. So that's for the first input, that's the speed of the vehicle. So the same thing, the second one, how many hours it traveled, the same thing, they need to be greater, equal to 0, and we only accept integer. So the same thing, this time you should using a while loop as well. If user enter any number less than 0, we need to ask them again. So you have 2 while loop to check the user to input. Then you have the third one. After user tell us the speed and hours, you need to have the while loop to display the total distance they travel each hour. So for example, now we know user travel for 6 hours. So then you need to have a table to display every hour what is the distance they traveled. So that we say you need to have a table format. Then they will have the hours first, then how many miles they travel. Then I want you to display in 1 decimal digit. So that's why here to calculate distance, how many miles traveled, that will be distance times this equal to the speed times the hours. So then when you ask for the user input, so the first one we need to do the input validation. So we don't accept a negative number for speed, and we don't accept any value less than 1 for the time traveled.